So I just want to say thank you again for taking the time out of your day to meet with me and help Ron and I with this project. So for the first question, I guess, can you just introduce yourself and summarize what you do and how you got into the sport industry?
My name is Shinn. I am the athlete brand marketing director at Nike for LeBron James and Naomi Osaka. And man, I My journey was a little different than most, but I started as an intern in 2012 with the brand back in China. I led that internship for about 3 months or so, and that was my freshman year going into my sophomore year. And so from there, I was able to take a few more internships in San Francisco, where I studied at the University of San Francisco International Business and Modern and Asian Studies. And I was working for like software companies and everything from like creating leads in Salesforce to, just helping all the different account executives on the sales floor. So I was starting to, cut my teeth in sales a little bit and just trying to figure out what I ultimately wanted to do. And I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity to study abroad in Beijing. So I did that my junior year and studied there for about 6 months before I took another internship in China with a creative consulting agency where I was basically their social media intern. And then by my senior year, I was like, I'm tired of working for free. I need a job. So I did around like five different internships, man, and I landed a role as a digital marketing consultant where I was selling online marketing, SEO, digital advertisements in San Fran, where I was cold calling, pitching, going out to close business, and continuing to grow my book over time. And then I just felt like I hit a ceiling with sales. I was like, this isn't necessarily for me. And I was always reaching out to my Nike contacts from my first internship. Never really got a lot of responses, but I finally got a response one day and they were like, hey, there could be a contracting role opening up in sportswear, which at the time, the division was APLA, Asia Pacific, Latin America. And for me studying international business, it just made perfect sense. So
Mhm.
a few months go by, everything went dark, and I finally followed up again and I was like, hey, what's going on with that role? And sure enough, it opened up. I applied for it. I was fortunate enough to grab it. And from there, I just did a 1 year contract before transitioning full time into Nike. And then during my time as a brand specialist, I was fortunate enough to get a promotion to manager. Did that for 2 years. Then we went through a reorganization. And through that reorg, I was promoted to the athlete brand director for LeBron. And I was also the athlete director for Kylian Mbappe and Sabrina Ionescu as well. But now I focus on LeBron and Naomi exclusively. So yeah, that was my journey.
Got it. Thank you. And do you mind describing a little bit more about like your responsibilities working with like LeBron?
Yeah, so basically, I create what's called an athlete marketing brand plan, where essentially, and I always use the example for brand marketing, it's we're like, if you think of an orchestra, we're like the conductors, right? You have you being able to like orchestrate literally musical, but actual marketing functions to create a great body of work that looks great externally to a consumer. So my role in particular is to pull together a cohesive plan that uses all the different marketing functions like digital marketing, influencer marketing, let's see, retail marketing, every marketing different function. And so I basically put together a 2 to 3 year plan and roadmap for LeBron that says, okay, this is your positioning as a brand, and this is what will basically inform everything from product design to storytelling to experiences. Once you land that positioning based on your insight from your athlete, then you're able to translate that into a 365 plan that allows you to plan different marketing tactics and executions against it over a 2 to 3 year span. So, a lot of times with LeBron, unfortunately, I'm always busy because he always has something,
Hmm.
from I was fortunate enough to work on Space Jam, the LeBron 20, his all-time scoring record that he just broke, worked on that. Man, he has something literally every other month. So it's about trying to pull up, see it all, and then be able to have the different functions and resources of support to drive it holistically.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then my
Yeah.
next question is, what would you say are one to two highlights of your sports career?
Oh, I think for me working on I mean, dude, I'm a huge LeBron fan, bro. So,
Mhm.
I think for that, for me, it's like landing him as an athlete in my focus was like the number one thing for me of just like, okay, like now I'm really starting to step up to the plate a little bit and take a big swing. I think that was definitely like my top one when I heard about the role and then I figured out who I'd be working with. I think the second thing, this recent launch and campaign, I drove around the LeBron 20. Just getting everybody to wear LeBrons again was a big deal because nobody was wearing his product because they were too
Mhm.
bulky and they were too large. So now we went low top. We positioned the product as it was for the next generation. It's not for LeBron anymore. And that was a
Mhm.
big insight for us in my meetings with LeBron, where he's like, hey, we need to be building for the next generation, not for me. Like I want to be in the shoe of the consumer, not the consumer in my shoes. And so you hear things like that as a marketeer, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that can translate to storytelling in terms of who we're positioning wearing the shoe, who's receiving it. And then also on the other side, like from a pricing standpoint as well in the business of like, okay, where do we need to go to actually have this shoe cut through? So my goal for LeBron and his latest shoe was to increase wear of his shoe by 5% across all leagues, all levels. Needless to say, we shattered that, and I think that for me felt good to just reset and keep people rocking his shoes again. That's really cool.
Got it. Thank you. And then my next question is, what are some key lessons that you've learned working in sports throughout your career?
I think the biggest one is like you're always, at least in my space, like I'm very close to the sun, right? Where it basically means like it's high pressure, it's high visibility, it's you're meeting up with Braun and his team, but that's also a double-edged sword because if anything slips, it's gonna fall back on you, right?
Hmm.
Like it's nobody else but you. So like all the things that someone would like in a role, it has that equipped within it. But it's also one of those roles where you're not going to really take a lot of time off, or you're going to take time off, but then get those random calls, while you're on PTO or while you're checked out. And so I think that for me is like being ready and being flexible, and being open to have that lifestyle change because it was a lifestyle change. It's like, yeah, I'm on the clock all the time. I think that was one big thing of just being open to being able to take on a role like that. I think the other side of it, is the team itself, right? Like I can't do my job without the power of the team. And so that's obviously a sport methodology within itself, right? If there's no I in team, well, for me, I can't do my job without the power of my functions. So being able to orchestrate an enterprise approach that gets everybody rallied around an insight or an idea to see that to execution. I mean, that in itself, the power of influence is another big thing that I learned. I think it's just like putting yourself in a mindset of like not accepting anything less than cool stuff. For me is always my mantra, but also being like uncomfortable, being comfortable with being uncomfortable as well. Because you start to get thrown in these situations where, it's me against three or four people from LeBron's side, or the
Hmm.
whole executive leadership team, and I'm presenting a holistic strategy and a plan. But I know no one can really test me if I'm showing up with the right expertise and the right preparedness. But I am very uncomfortable in that situation, but I know I can't show that. So I think, I feel like I hit a few things in there, but I think my last one I would say is being comfortable being uncomfortable is like a big thing I've learned from this space.
Got it. And that kind of leads me to my last question was, what advice would you offer to college students, recent graduates pursuing careers in sports?
I think my biggest one is like be curious. Like it's one of those spaces where I mean there's a wealth of opportunity, but it's also about, excuse me, it's also about just finding the ones that make sense for you and your passion, right? Like, but also being able to say, hey, like me, I don't know anything about tennis, but I'm working with Naomi Osaka. So it's like you got to be able to be open to learning things and
Hmm.
working on. Are you right-handed or are you left-handed?
I'm left-handed.
All right. So you got to be able to work on your right, even though you're great
Hmm.
on your left, right? So I think it's those things of like, iron sharpens iron approach where if you're not continuing to stay curious, you're gonna stay stagnant. And if you, for example, love basketball and you just work on basketball, then you're just a basketball guy.
Hmm.
But what about running or football or American football or like the other areas of the spectrums of sport? I think you got to be open to it all, right? I think next, and I always whenever I mentor or talk to kids, like college kids like yourself, I always ask, like, what's your dream job? And if you don't have a vision, at least an idea or a North Star, it's hard for me to help you. Right. So I think
Mhm.
another idea is just trying to figure out, like, even if it's a blue sky idea of what you ultimately want to do, just be declarative about it. Cause then that's going to make it easier for someone like myself or anyone to say, oh, okay, I know that Darren wants to do XYZ. So I'm going to try and help him get to XYZ. Right. And then on the flip side of that, you can know where your North Star is and then reverse engineer your path to get to that North Star. So it's a lot easier versus floating and saying, okay, I'm going to take a brand role here or a sport marketing role there. And it doesn't really cobble into anything. You start to become a little stagnant versus coming in, having a POV saying, I want to be the CEO of boom, right? And then it's like, okay,
Mhm.
what's everything you got to do to get to that? So I would just challenge you and any college student just to like just dream big, but then figure out like, can you actually start to align your journey now, do the stuff you need to do now, and work on the projects you need to get you to that goal in the next 10 years, right? So curious, dream big, right? Figure out the path that gets you to where you want to go, and then be hungry, humble, and patient. I think if you could stay hungry, take on as much as you can, but still stay humble at the core, but patient for your opportunity, it'll always present itself. I think a lot of folks, I'm guilty of it, all of us are. It's like we want to bite off more than we can chew. But sometimes you get put into that arena and you get called out because you don't know what the hell you're talking about, or you're just young, and people are older and they're like, who is
Mhm.
this young cat? So you gotta just make sure like you step into those rooms like you're dialed, and nobody can challenge you on anything.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk and provide such great advice about your role as well as advice for up and coming college students in the industry of sports.